What was it?
Well, we were talking about some of the things, and you were talking about when was Johnny born?
1918.
Johnny.
Oh no, Johnny was
Johnny.
born in 42.
Where was Johnny born? Where was he born?
We lived at Geigertown on the farm.
Okay. Trying to think. And where I know the other thing I wanted to ask you about was Uncle Lester. How did you meet Uncle Lester, and around what time was that you started dating? And what was the typical dates that you did, and all that kind of stuff?
We went together 9 years because it was the Depression. Yeah, I met him. A girl with the name of Hermie Lutz was in my class at Kutztown, and she lived in town, and we used to meet every now and then and go for hikes and different things. And then through her I met Jenny Grimm, another little girl, and she was going with Lester's brother. And then this Jenny and Lester's brother were going to get married, and she asked me to be maid of honor, and Lester stood for his brother. So I met him a little before the wedding at his house. And I didn't say much. He had a little 29 Ford. That was the first one after the Model A. It looked like a tin can, the more, it was a good little car. And then after the wedding, he took me home, and I thought, gee, I must be slipping. He didn't even ask for a date, But then in a day or two, I got a letter, and he was asking for a date. And we just started to go together, and that was it.
What kind of stuff did you do when you went out on dates?
Why, a whole gang of couples from Kutztown had a farm out at Umbrella Hill in the back of Kutztown. And then we'd go out there for a whole weekend. And the fellas were on one side and the girls on the other. And we went out there for years. And you'd hike, and we women would make meals. And then Depression came. He didn't have work or anything. Then he went back to college for 4 years. And then when he was finished, I owned the farm, but I said, you better teach a year before you get married. And then I couldn't teach in Reading if I got married. That was all in the hands of a bunch of old maids. And that next spring then, after he was teaching, why, he boarded with a couple in Geigertown, and I lived with my mother over at Joanna Heights. And we start fixing the farm and painting and working at it over the weekend. And then he wanted a job, and there just weren't any jobs. That was 1936. Just teaching, you just had to know somebody. So Ed Woodward, you remember Ed Woodward, where my mother worked for him. He was a fireman on the trains that ran to Coatesville, the big freight trains. And his engineer was a man by the name of Zur. And he was president of the school board at Geigertown and down at, along the river, what was that little town, Monocacy. And there was an opening there, and Lester heard about it, and he went and saw the school directors and everything. And then this friend of ours, Ed Woodward, said to Zur, he said, I want that boy to get that job. 35 were after it. He earned $900 a year. And he got it, though. And he worked there for a few years, and then we got rid of the farm and stuff. We moved down to Andalusia, and that's Bucks County. And then we worked for Kurtz King well, it was Ben Salem Township, and he had a good job there then. And I taught there then, too.
Isn't it true that when you got married, you kept on teaching and they couldn't do anything, or you were the first one to really
Yeah,
break it?
that's right. I said he should teach the first year, and I knew I had to quit in Reading because we were going to get married. And the law was passed then that in Pennsylvania a married woman could teach. And this was around March or April. And oh boy, I can stay on, you know. And I asked, I didn't say anything, and we got married over Memorial Day. And this law was passed. In the meantime, Miss Mayer at high school, I guess she must have backed me, because for each grade, all the state teacher colleges, then they were called state teacher colleges, not normal schools anymore, had a girl placed in each group. And I knew I had a job in Reading in May or around April, March or April. And I attributed that to her. And then we stayed on. I taught another year because our wages were high, and higher there. I got more than Lester did. Well, Lester got $1,000 the next year. The janitor got $1,200. Lester got $1,000. And then we went down to Andalusia. He got $2,000 in Andalusia. I was getting $2,300 in Reading. Reading paid well, always did. So I thought I better go in and thank Miss Mayer. Now Miss Mayer was a holy terror that had every girl in high school scared. And she was retired and lived on Walnut Street in one of those big old homes. And she was German and big hook nose, you know, we were all scared of her. So I thought, well, I'll go in and thank her for this. So we had to keep an attendance record. It was a great big red book, and that was state records. And I had one lesson on it, and looked like Greek to me, but I thought, no, I'll ask your mother, Ethel. She'll help me with it. So I had this in my arm, and I went down, knocked on the door. The door opened. The first thing I heard her shouting at the top of her voice, "Put that flower pot on the other sill." And then she turned around and saw me, and she said, come in. I thought she was going to kiss me, but she didn't. So finally she saw this red register. I already had a job in Reading. So she said, "Oh, I see you have the register. How are you getting along with it?" And I was just ready to say it looked like Greek, you know. And she said, any girl that can't make out a register doesn't belong having a job in Reading. She said, "Now how are you getting along?" I said, no trouble. I wasn't going to tell her, but I almost blew it, but I didn't. And I thanked her then. And I thought, here's where I go to Ethel, find out, because her mother had told it. I would have really didn't deserve a job in the city of Reading. Oh, and I almost told her it looked like Greek. But that's how we got through. Then I heard all about this, that you could teach. So I went back to my school. Tuesday after, I think we had off Monday. Tuesday, I went back to school. First thing outside my door, 10th and Green, Tommy Ford came. He was superintendent then. And he said, and he could hardly talk. It was 3 flights of double steps, and he was all out of breath. And he said, he came to see if I had married over there. I said, yes. He said, well, the school board's of the opinion that we'd like our married women to quit, hand in their resignation. I said, well, I understand it's state law now. I'll be able to teach. And I said, if it's going to cause trouble, I said, of course, I'll do something about it. And then he waited a while and cleared his throat. He said, well, I expect the same caliber work as I got from you as a single woman now that you're married. And he flew down the steps. And all my friends got married. We were all old maids.
Why is it that they didn't want married women? Because they were going to have children and then they couldn't teach?
Yeah, just an idea that you weren't capable once you're married. You belonged home with your kids. See, in the county, anywhere else, it was always up to the school board. And Reading always had a school board like that. You got to remember, all the head ones were women, old maids.
When were you allowed to vote? When were you allowed to vote?
Allowed to what?
Vote.
Vote.
Yeah. You couldn't vote right away, could you?
I think we had to be 21.
No, but what year? I mean, you couldn't vote until the early 30s, wasn't it?
Oh no, women
couldn't. 20s?
No.
Women couldn't vote in the early 1900s. There was a women's revolution in the 20s.
Well, if it did, it would have been my mother's time,
Oh,
not
okay,
mine.
so it would have been, you would
Yeah.
have been too young at the time then.
That's right.
Yeah.
That would have been my mother, yeah.
But you always remember being able to vote.
Remember what?
Being able
oh,
to vote.
yeah, absolutely.
Who's the most, who's the president that stands out in your head the most?
Well, being a Republican, but I sure liked Teddy Roosevelt. Of course, he was a rough rider and liked horses. And secondly, he was the first one to pass legislation to give teachers more money. He was the first president that backed us. And we got more. And they made the state mandates higher and higher then, and I give him credit for that.
What other presidents do you remember?
Oh, all the way back,
What's the earliest president you remember?
I guess Roosevelt would be about the earliest that you'd be aware of. And of course, Harding and who were some of those? Well, you know Truman. You remember Truman. Don't you remember Truman?
Well, I mean, I know him from history
You know,
books, but I mean...
he was the one moved all of the offices and everything out to right there at the Mississippi River in the country. Well, anyway,
That's okay.
where his hometown.
Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri. And everything, he moved out there. A lot of people went out there with their jobs from Washington. He conducted a lot of stuff from there.
So you remember Harding,
Yeah,
and Teddy Roosevelt, and who else?
I think Roosevelt's the earliest I
The
remember.
earliest one?
Yeah, there were some when I was younger, but I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And Uncle Morris, my father's brother, oldest brother, always worked at Harrisburg. It was an appointment job. I don't know what it was, but he was there for years and years, and he could ride in that beautiful script, and they'd all come to him up there to make out their wedding license to put the riding fancy, and he commuted for years, come home every weekend to Harrisburg. And then that's when my father became very interested in politics, and we were devout Republicans, and I liked Teddy Roosevelt and voted for him. Well, he's the one put these kids to work, and he's a good man.
I think that's all I can think of. Was there anything else you were thinking of that you wanted to talk about?
When my father's sister's children, she had 5, 6, and the little boy down in Philadelphia. And they're all living. And Lottie lives in a nursing home, and she was the second child. These are my cousins. They're all living. Uncle Morris's 2 daughters, Emily and Marion, and they were considerably older than I, and they were 6 feet tall and about that wide. They had to drink. They were like their father. Uncle Morris was so thin. So were the girls.
Where did the Gaiman side come in?
Well, through the father, Uncle Morris.
Is he the gay? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
See, Uncle Franz, Uncle Morris, same as my father.
Oh.
Gaiman, through their mother.
Their mother was the
Their mother was a Gaiman.
My grandfather's, my great
Your
grandmother.
your
was
great
the Gaiman.
grandmother, yeah. And I know nothing at all about Henry Hoffman, nothing, because he died young, and I never heard them talk about him. See, then Uncle Franz, my father's brother, of course, Naomi's father, he married a Gaiman, but a rather distant Gaiman, but then their children were never healthy.
Now what were, name grandmother's brothers and sisters? What are grandmother's brothers and sisters' names?
I only know Valentine.
No, my grandmother.
You mean Bessie?
Your mother.
My mother.
Name her brothers and sisters.
Oh, well, Uncle Isaac was the oldest, and then Kate and Luberta, we always call her Bertie, and Charlie, my mother, and then Charlie. There were 5 of them.
That was it.
And then she used to have to mind Uncle Charlie. He was still on the farm out there on Ohlone. And she'd have to watch because the stream ran almost through their barnyard, and she had to watch him.
Is that the one I have the small picture of?
Uh-huh.
That's the farm
little
that's under
farm.
the dam.
Hmm. But then the big picture, the photograph you have,
The painting.
that's that in the house were the Millers, and then the little white house were the Rothenbergers.
Oh.
They're a distant cousin of ours, those Rothenbergers up around Leesport.
Now her brother that was the painter, who was that? Who was the artist?
Uncle Ike.
Uncle Ike.
Yeah, that was.
Because he did painting with the other famous painter around Reading.
Yeah, he took all these lessons from Ben Austin.
Yeah, and there's another one that.
Yeah.
Who does Jack
Well,
have that painting of? The painting in your living room.
Shera.
Sure, he was
Chris
painting
Shera.
with him too.
Ben
yes.
Austin. No, he studied with Chris Shera, but Ben Austin was another good one. He
Uh-huh.
painted all the peeps and the
chickens.
the
yeah.
chickens, and I tell you who has a beautiful painting of that, Earl Savage. He's got one with the chicken and her peeps. Boy, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
But Chris Shera's things are in the museum. And then he had a brother, Victor. He didn't paint too well, though. Lois has one of Victor's paintings. I don't think they're any good. Aunt Bertie, Luberta, had a painting that took up almost a wall. And it was an Indian encampment with hides built all around like a fence. And the deer, stags are cutting it down and jumping in. And I wonder where that picture got to. That was just beautiful. By the way, I had the negative of that picture that you have.
Oh.
You know, of the
yes.
Miller and Rothenberger.
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah. Get some prints made.
Yeah, my mother used to go to see cousins, the Rothenbergers.
What year was grandmother born? Was that 1898?
No, about 1885.
85.
Just offhand. Isn't it on that cup I gave you?
Probably, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else.
I don't know what else either. You
Yeah.
know more about.
Other than trying to delve into the
Oh yeah, no.
the
I don't
history
get into all
now.
that.
that we have to put in writing.
Up until practically our family, that the lineage is on those type.
That's all
Maybe.
on the
Yeah, but
grandmother's side. Yes.
I think I wrote my name in or something, but then I don't think Johnny's on, and I don't think Kevin's on.
you said
You have to add it to it.
you said you could join the DAR. Who was in the revolution?
That was on mother's side. Grandma Hoffman. It's not recording now.
Yeah. No, you go ahead and say
No, I
it.
didn't want to say this.
What?
Say it.
I think her name was McNulty, and I think she was born out of wedlock.
Oh.
That's been the story. So see, then you can't get in because the bloodline, not because she's illegitimate, but the bloodline has to go straight through to join.
Oh, I see.
But you could join on mother's side, I'm sure.
Huh. But you don't know the name of the person that was in the revolution, actually.
Probably be buried up at Gurnitz, at the Gurnitz Church.
Would that be a Dobson?
Well, that would have to be. That would have to be on your great grandmother's side, or grandfather. I don't know which. But I don't think on the Dobson side because they came from Ireland. I think they stopped off in France and then to Ireland. And then the father went home. He left the son here. It's in that story, wasn't it? And when he come back, well, he didn't come back, I guess.
He and the daughter never came back.
Yeah.
Where does
Wait,
it?
I gotta change the tape.